The morning of January 17th started like any other at Clarence House. But for Captain James Whitmore, a decorated officer in the Queen's Guard with 15 years of service, it would become the day he would never forget. The day everything he thought he knew about loyalty and duty would be tested in ways he never imagined. James stood at attention in the corridor outside the private drawing room. His red tunic was pressed to perfection. His bearskin hat sat perfectly aligned. But something felt different that morning. The air itself seemed heavy, charged with an energy he couldn't name. Inside the drawing room, voices rose and fell. He wasn't supposed to listen. Guards were trained to be invisible, to hear nothing, to see nothing. But the walls of Clarence House were old, and some sounds traveled whether you wanted them to or not. The newspapers had been relentless that week. Every front page, every news website, every social media feed carried the same headline: Queen Kate. The public had fallen completely in love with Catherine, Princess of Wales. Her recent work with children's mental health charities had captured hearts across the nation. One particular photo of her comforting a young girl at a hospital had gone viral, shared millions of times with captions calling her the people's queen and the future we deserve. It was beautiful. It was genuine. And apparently it was causing a crisis behind palace walls. If you're interested in stories that pull back the curtain on real human moments in extraordinary places, consider subscribing. These are the stories that remind us that crowns don't protect anyone from being human. James had seen Camilla. The queen consort arrived that morning. Her face had been tight, her movements sharp. She swept past him without the usual polite nod. Her lady-in-waiting followed close behind, carrying a stack of newspapers and a tablet. The air seemed to crackle as she passed. Now, standing guard James could hear fragments. A voice rising in pitch. The word unacceptable cutting through the thick door. The sound of something hitting a table. Then footsteps. Fast, angry footsteps approaching the door. James straightened even more, if that was possible. His eyes fixed on the painting across the hallway. A guard does not react. A guard does not flinch. The door flew open. Camilla stood in the doorway, her face flushed, her eyes blazing. In her hand, she clutched a copy of the Times. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Queen Kate, why the nation has already chosen its future." For a moment, time seemed to stop. James could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers crumpled the newspaper's edge. He could hear her breathing, sharp and controlled, the kind of breathing that comes when someone is trying very hard not to explode completely. "They have no right," she said, her voice low and shaking. She wasn't speaking to James. She was speaking to the air, to the universe, to the unfairness of it all. "I am the queen consort. I stood by him for decades while they made me the villain. And now this. This girl gets everything handed to her on a silver platter." The lady-in-waiting appeared behind her, face pale. "Your Majesty, please, don't." Camilla held up one hand. "Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me this doesn't matter. I have earned my place. I have paid my dues in ways no one will ever understand." James kept his eyes forward. His heart hammered in his chest. Guards witnessed many things, but this felt different. This felt like watching something crack that was supposed to be unbreakable. What happened next would change everything. But in that moment, standing in the gilded corridor of Clarence House, James had no idea that his simple act of duty would become the story that shook the palace to its foundations. Camilla turned and walked back into the room. The door closed, but not completely. Through the gap, James could see her pacing, back and forth, like a caged animal trying to find a way out. "Bring me my private secretary," she said to someone inside. "And I want a meeting with the King's communications team. Today, this morning, now." The lady-in-waiting hurried past James, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She returned 10 minutes later with 2 men in dark suits. They entered the drawing room with the careful movements of people walking into a minefield. James remained still, perfectly still, but his mind was racing. He had served the royal family through scandals and celebrations. He had stood guard during the Queen's funeral, fighting back tears behind his stoic expression. He had watched Charles become king, had witnessed the weight of the crown settle onto shoulders that had waited 70 years for it. And through it all, he had seen Camilla transform from the most hated woman in Britain to someone the public had learned to accept, if not love. But acceptance wasn't enough. That much was becoming clear. Inside the room, the voices grew louder. One of the men was trying to explain something about media cycles and public sentiment. Camilla cut him off. I don't care about media cycles. I care about respect. I care about the fact that I am the queen consort. And some girl who married in barely 15 years ago is being treated like she's already on the throne, Your Majesty. With respect, the man said carefully, the Princess of Wales has done nothing wrong. Her charitable work has been exemplary. The public's response is simply, I know what the public's response is. The sound of a hand slamming on wood echoed through the door. I read the same polls you do. I see the same social media you do. Queen Kate. As if titles are given by Twitter likes and Instagram hearts. There was a long silence. Then another voice, softer, more diplomatic. Perhaps if we could arrange more joint appearances. Show unity between the generations. The public loves seeing the family together, Unity, Camilla repeated, and the words sounded bitter. You want me to stand next to her and smile while they take photos? While they compare us? While they make it clear who they prefer? James shifted slightly. His legs were beginning to ache, but that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was the pain in her voice. Beneath the anger, beneath the pride, there was something else. Something raw and wounded. He had daughters. 2 girls who looked up to strong women who believed that hard work and dedication would be rewarded. What would he tell them about this? That sometimes, no matter how hard you try, the world has already decided who they want you to be. The door opened again. This time, it was one of the men in suits. He looked exhausted. He nodded briefly to James and walked away, pulling out his phone before he even reached the end of the corridor. Through the still-open door, James could see Camilla standing by the window. Her back was straight, her shoulders squared, but her hand trembled slightly as she touched the curtain. They want her to be Diana 2.0, she said quietly. That's what this is really about. They couldn't keep her, so they're projecting everything they loved about her onto Catherine. And I'm still the villain. After all these years, I'm still the woman who ruined the fairy tale. The remaining advisor cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the King. The King is at Windsor dealing with parliamentary papers. The King doesn't read social media. The King doesn't see the comments calling for him to abdicate in favor of William and his perfect wife. Her voice cracked. The King doesn't understand what it's like to be constantly compared and constantly found wanting. James felt something twist in his chest. This wasn't the proud, confident woman he had guarded for years. This was someone breaking under pressure that had been building for decades. The advisor left a few minutes later. Then the lady in waiting. Then the rest of the staff, one by one. Until it was just Camilla in the drawing room and James in the corridor. He could hear her breathing, could hear the rustle of newspaper pages, could hear the sharp crack of paper being torn, and then footsteps approaching the door again. This time, when she emerged, her eyes were dry but red-rimmed. Her jaw was set with determination. She looked at James directly for the first time that morning. Captain Whitmore, she said, her voice steady now, cold, controlled. I need you to accompany me to Kensington Palace. James's heart skipped. Kensington Palace, where William and Catherine lived with their children? Of course, Your Majesty, he replied. He had no idea he was about to witness something that would make the morning's outburst look like a minor disagreement. The drive to Kensington Palace took 23 minutes. James sat in the front passenger seat of the Range Rover, next to the driver. Behind him, Camilla stared out the window in complete silence. London passed by in a blur of gray buildings and winter clouds. James had made this journey dozens of times before, but never like this. Never with this tension filling the car like smoke, making it hard to breathe. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Lieutenant Catherine Morris, another guard who worked at the Kensington Palace detail. Heads up. Unscheduled visit incoming. What's the situation? James typed back quickly. Unclear. Stay sharp." They pulled through the gates of Kensington Palace at exactly 11:47. The gravel crunched under the tires. A few tourists stood at the far fence taking photos, completely unaware of what was unfolding behind the palace walls. Lieutenant Morris stood at attention near the entrance. Her eyes met James's briefly. In that glance he saw the question, "What's happening?" He gave the slightest shake of his head. "I don't know." Camilla stepped out of the car before anyone could open the door for her. She moved with purpose now, the earlier vulnerability locked away behind layers of royal training and aristocratic composure. "Your Majesty," Lieutenant Morris said, bowing her head. "The Princess of Wales is in the morning room." "She wasn't expecting. I don't need an appointment to visit my daughter-in-law," Camilla said curtly. "Please inform her I'm here." Maurice hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then she nodded and spoke quietly into her radio. They waited in the entrance hall. A magnificent chandelier hung overhead, casting soft light on the cream-colored walls. Portraits of past royals watched from their frames. James wondered what they would think of this moment. What Queen Victoria would say. What Queen Elizabeth would advise. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Catherine appeared, wearing a simple cream sweater and dark trousers. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked surprised but composed. "Camilla," she said, using the familiar name rather than the title. There was warmth in her voice, but also caution. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" "We need to talk," Camilla replied. "Privately." Catherine's eyes flickered to James and Morris, then back to Camilla. "Of course. Let's go to my study." James and Morris took positions outside the study door. Through the thick oak, the voices were muffled at first, polite, careful, the sound of two women who knew. They were walking on ice. Then the ice began to crack. "You must know what's happening." Camilla's voice rose slightly. "You must see the headlines. Queen Kate. They're already crowning you, and I'm still here. Still alive. Still the actual queen consort." "I have no control over what the press writes," Catherine responded, her voice calm but firm. "I've never asked for those headlines. I've never encouraged, haven't you?" The question cut through the air like a blade. "Your perfect photo opportunities. Your touching moments with sick children. Your designer outfits that somehow always make the front page. You play the game beautifully, Catherine. Better than I ever did. That's not fair." Now Catherine's voice carried an edge. "I do the work because I care about the work. Because those children need support. Because mental health matters. I'm not performing for cameras. Everyone is performing for cameras. That's what this life is. Every moment, every gesture, every smile is calculated. And you've calculated perfectly." There was a pause. James could hear movement inside. Someone walking toward the window, perhaps. "I think you should leave," Catherine said quietly. "I'm not finished." "Yes, you are." Catherine's voice was steel now. "I understand that you're upset. I understand that the media can be cruel and unfair. But I will not stand in my own home and be accused of scheming against you. I have been nothing but respectful to you from the day I married into this family." "Respectful." Camilla laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about respect? Do you know what it's like to be hated for decades? To have every newspaper call you a homewrecker, a villain, the woman who destroyed Diana? I lived through that. I survived that. And just when I thought I had finally earned some peace, some acceptance, you come along and they love you instantly. Perfect Kate. St. Catherine. The people's queen. I am not Diana." Catherine's voice was sharp now, almost angry. "And I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm trying to do my duty. That's all I've ever tried to do. Your duty is to support the crown, not to overshadow it." The words hung in the air like poison. James and Morris exchanged glances. This was worse than either of them had imagined. This wasn't just about headlines or public opinion. This was about years of pain, years of resentment. It's finally exploding. Then came the sound that changed everything. The study door flew open. Catherine stood there, her face pale, but her eyes blazing. Behind her, Camilla stood rigid, her hands clenched at her sides. "Captain Whitmore," Catherine said, her voice shaking slightly. Please escort the queen consort back to Clarence House. Camilla stepped forward. You don't dismiss me. You are a guest in my home, Catherine interrupted, and I am asking you to leave. The two women stared at each other. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. What happened next would become the moment that defined everything that came after. James stepped forward carefully, his mind racing through protocols he had never actually needed to use. What do you do when two members of the royal family are in direct conflict? Who takes precedence? The king's wife or the heir's wife? Your Majesty, he addressed Camilla quietly. Perhaps it would be best— Don't, Camilla snapped, not taking her eyes off Catherine. Don't tell me what's best. I came here to have an honest conversation, and instead I'm being thrown out like some unwanted visitor. You came here to blame me for circumstances I don't control, Catherine replied. Her voice was steady now, but James could see her hands trembling slightly at her sides. And I won't accept that. Not in my home, not in front of my staff. Something flickered across Camilla's face. Hurt. Deep, genuine hurt. For a moment, James saw past the queen consort, past the royal title, saw just a woman who felt cornered and desperate. You have no idea what this costs, Camilla said softly. You have no idea what it's like to be second choice. To know that your husband's first wife, dead for nearly 3 decades, is still more beloved than you will ever be, and now you're going to be first choice. The favorite. The one they wanted all along. Catherine's expression softened slightly. I'm not your enemy, Camilla. Then why does it feel like everyone else has already chosen you over me? The question hung in the air, raw and painful. Before Catherine could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Quick, purposeful footsteps. James turned to see Prince William striding toward them, his face dark with concern. What's going on? William asked, looking between the two women. Catherine. Your stepmother was just leaving, Catherine said quietly. William's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Camilla. James saw something he had never seen before. Disappointment in the prince's usually careful expression. Camilla, what did you do? What did I do? Camilla's voice rose again. Your wife is being called queen by half the country, and I'm supposed to smile and accept it? I'm supposed to pretend that doesn't undermine everything. Catherine has done nothing wrong. William interrupted, his voice firm. She has been dutiful, gracious, and hard-working. If the public admires her, that's because she's earned it. Of course you would defend her. She's your wife. But I'm family too. I've been part of this family for 20 years, yes? And you've had to fight for acceptance every day of it. I understand that. But taking that frustration out on Catherine is not only unfair, it's beneath you. Camilla's face went white. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I see. So it's unanimous then. Perfect Kate can do no wrong, and I'm the bitter old woman who can't handle her success. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. William took a breath, clearly trying to control his temper. I think you need to go. When you're ready to have a civil conversation, we can talk. But not like this. Camilla looked at him for a long moment, then at Catherine, then finally at James. Fine, she said, her voice cold as ice. Captain Whitmore, we're leaving. She swept past them all, her back straight, her head high. But James, walking behind her, could see the slight tremor in her shoulders, could see the way she blinked rapidly as they moved through the hallway. They reached the entrance hall. The front door stood ahead, sunlight streaming through the glass panels on either side. Lieutenant Maurice had already radioed for the car, but as they approached the door, something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Maurice didn't bow. She stood at attention, eyes forward, completely still. But she didn't bow, didn't incline her head, didn't show the traditional gesture of respect that guards always showed to senior royals. James felt his stomach drop. Camilla stopped. She had noticed. Of course she had noticed. Her face was impassive, professional, but the lack of a bow was deliberate, intentional. Lieutenant Maurice, Camilla repeated, stepping closer. Did you forget your training? Or are you making a statement? James's mind raced. He needed to defuse this. Needed to protect Maurice from what could be a career-ending moment. But before he could speak, Morris finally responded, "I serve the crown, Your Majesty, and I serve those who honor what the crown represents." The words were perfectly polite, perfectly respectful in tone, but the meaning was clear. Camilla's face flushed red. She dares to have an opinion?" Catherine's voice came from behind them. She had followed them to the entrance hall, with William close behind. Just like millions of others in this country, an opinion she's expressing while in uniform, Camilla snapped. "That's insubordination. That's loyalty," William said quietly. "Loyalty to what this family should stand for. Kindness, service, grace under pressure. Catherine embodies those things. And people notice. Guards notice." Camilla looked at them all, at Morris standing firm, at James trying to maintain neutrality, at William and Catherine united against her. And something in her seemed to break completely. The mask of royal composure shattered. "You want to know about service?" Camilla's voice cracked. "I gave up everything for this family. My reputation, my privacy, my dignity. I stood beside Charles when the whole world hated me for it. I waited. I endured. I smiled through the abuse and the mockery and the endless comparisons to a dead woman I could never measure up to." Her hands were shaking now, actually shaking. "And now, after everything, after finally becoming queen consort, after finally thinking I might have earned some measure of respect, I have to watch it all get handed to someone else. Someone younger. Someone prettier. Someone the people actually want." Tears began to stream down her face. Real tears. Not the careful, controlled emotion of a royal photo op, but raw, uncontrolled grief. "I'm not a villain," she whispered. "I'm not cruel. I just wanted to matter. I wanted my years of service to count for something." "Is that so terrible? Is that such a crime?" The entrance hall fell silent. James felt his throat tighten. He had daughters, yes. But he also had a mother who had given up her career to support his father, who had stood in the shadows while his father got the promotions and the praise, who had smiled and said it didn't matter, even when everyone could see it did. He saw his mother and Camilla's face at that moment. Catherine moved forward slowly. She reached out and gently touched Camilla's arm. "Your service does matter," Catherine said softly. "Your years do count. But the public's love isn't something we can control or demand. It comes or it doesn't. All we can do is the work and hope it's enough." "It's not enough for you," Camilla said bitterly, wiping at her eyes. "You do the work and they worship you for it. I do the work and they tolerate me at best." "That's not Catherine's fault," William said, more gently now. "And deep down, you know that." Camilla pulled her arm away from Catherine's touch. She straightened her spine, tried to pull the mask back on, but it kept slipping. The tears kept falling. "I want to hate you," she said to Catherine. "It would be so much easier if I could just hate you. But you're kind. You're genuine. You're everything they want in a queen. And I'm just the woman who got in the way of the fairy tale." "You're the woman who loved a man through impossible circumstances," Catherine replied. "That takes courage. That takes strength. History will remember that, even if the tabloids won't." "History?" Camilla laughed weakly. "History will remember Diana. History will remember you. I'll be a footnote. The controversial second wife who was tolerated until someone better came along." The car pulled up outside. Through the glass door panels, James could see the driver waiting. Camilla looked at Lieutenant Morris one more time. Morris's face remained professional, but something had shifted in her eyes. Not quite sympathy, but understanding. Recognition of another woman fighting battles no one else could see. "I apologize for my outburst, Lieutenant," Camilla said quietly. "You don't deserve my anger." "None of you do." Morris bowed then. A deep, respectful bow. "Your service to the crown is appreciated, Your Majesty, even when it goes unrecognized by others." Camilla's face crumpled for just a moment. Then she nodded, turned, and walked toward the door. James moved to follow her, but William caught his arm. "Take care of her, Captain," William said quietly. She's hurting more than she ever admit. And despite everything, she is family. James nodded and followed Camilla to the car. The drive back to Clarence's house was completely silent. Camilla stared out the window, her face turned away. James could see her reflection in the glass. Could see the tears still sliding down her cheeks. When they arrived, she didn't wait for the door to be opened. She got out herself, walked straight to the entrance, and disappeared inside. James stood by the car for a long moment, processing everything he had witnessed. His phone buzzed. A message from Maurice. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. Refusing to bow, but it felt necessary. Am I wrong? James thought about his response carefully. About duty and loyalty. About the difference between the crown and the people who wear it. About his daughters and what he wanted them to learn about standing up for what they believe. And he typed back, "You followed your conscience. That's never wrong. But there will be consequences." Maurice replied immediately, "I know. I'm ready." James looked up at Clarence's house. Somewhere inside, Camilla was probably alone now. Probably still crying. Probably feeling more isolated than ever. He thought about going inside. About offering some word of comfort, even though it wasn't his place. Even though guards weren't supposed to cross that line. But before he could decide, his phone rang. It was the head of palace security. "Captain Whitmore, we need you at the main palace immediately. There's been a development regarding this morning's incident at Kensington. The king needs to speak with everyone involved."
Oh.
James's heart sank. The fallout was beginning. And something told him that what had happened today would echo through the palace, and the nation far longer than anyone expected. Buckingham Palace felt different when James arrived. The usual steady rhythm of staff moving through corridors seemed disrupted. People whispered in corners. Eyes followed him as he walked past. The head of palace security, Commander Richard Hayes, met him outside the king's private office. "Captain," Hayes said, his expression grave, "before you go in, I need to know exactly what happened at Kensington Palace. Everything you witnessed." James recounted it all. The argument, the confrontation, Lieutenant Morris's refusal to bow, Camilla's breakdown. He left nothing out, speaking in the clear, factual tone of a military report. Hayes listened without interrupting. When James finished, he nodded slowly. "Lieutenant Morris has already submitted a formal statement. She's expecting disciplinary action. Possibly dismissal. She was following her conscience, sir." "Her conscience doesn't override protocol, Captain. You know that?" "Yes, sir." James paused. "But if we punish every guard who has an opinion about the royals they serve, we'd have no guards left." Hayes almost smiled. "Almost, that's not your call to make. Or mine. The king wants to speak with you personally. And Captain, tread carefully. This situation is more delicate than you realize." The door opened. King Charles stood there, looking older than James remembered. The weight of the past few hours, or perhaps the past few decades, seemed to press down on his shoulders. "Captain Whitmore," the king said, "please, come in." The office was elegant, but understated. Books lined the walls. A portrait of Queen Elizabeth hung above the fireplace. Charles gestured to a chair and James sat, feeling deeply uncomfortable. Guards didn't sit in the presence of the king. "Heard multiple versions of this morning's events," Charles said, settling into his own chair with a heavy sigh. "From my wife. From my son. From Lieutenant Morris. Now I'd like to hear yours." James told the story again, more carefully this time. He tried to be neutral, to present only facts. But facts, he was learning, were never truly neutral when emotions ran this deep. When he finished, Charles was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the portrait of his mother, then back at James. "You have daughters, don't you, Captain?" The question caught James off guard. "Yes, Your Majesty. 2, 16 and 14. What do you tell them about navigating a world that often seems unfair? About dealing with comparisons and competition with other women?" James chose his words carefully. "I tell them that their worth isn't determined by how they measure up to anyone else. I tell them to focus on their own path, their own values, and I tell them that sometimes the world will be unkind no matter what they do. Charles nodded slowly. Wise advice? Advice I wish I had better understood earlier in my life. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace gardens. My wife is difficult sometimes. She can be prickly, defensive, proud to a fault. But she has endured more cruelty than most people could survive. The press called her every vile name imaginable. They blamed her for Diana's death, for destroying my first marriage, for corrupting the monarchy itself. He turned back to James. None of it was fair. Most of it was cruel beyond measure. And now, just when she thought she had finally found some peace, the cycle begins again. But this time, it's not about Diana. It's about Catherine, another beloved princess who makes Camilla look like the villain by simple comparison. The Princess of Wales has done nothing wrong, James said carefully. No, she hasn't. That's precisely the problem. There's no villain in this story. Just people trying their best in an impossible system. Charles returned to his chair. Lieutenant Morris will not be disciplined. Her refusal to bow, while technically a breach of protocol, was also an expression of the very independence of thought that makes the Guard trustworthy. If we punish people for having opinions, we create a system of mindless obedience. My mother never wanted that. He leaned forward. But I need to know, Captain Whitmore, where do your loyalties lie? If forced to choose between following the Queen Consort's orders and doing what you believe is right, what would you do? The question was a trap. Or a test. Maybe both. James met the king's eyes directly. I serve the crown, Your Majesty. Not any individual person, but the institution itself. And the crown represents values, duty, service, integrity. If anyone, regardless of title, asks me to act against those values, I cannot comply. Even if that person is the king. Even then, Your Majesty. Charles smiled sadly. Good. That's the correct answer. The answer my mother would have wanted to hear. He stood, indicating the meeting was over. But at the door, he paused. This morning's events will not become public. The staff involved have been instructed to maintain absolute discretion. The family will handle this privately, as we should have handled so many things privately over the years. Yes, Your Majesty. Did. But Captain, between you and me, do you think my wife was wrong? About Catherine, about the headlines, about feeling overshadowed. James considered lying, considered giving the diplomatic answer. But the king had asked for honesty. I think she was human, Your Majesty. I think she reacted the way anyone would when they feel their life's work is being diminished. Was it fair to blame the Princess of Wales? No, but feelings rarely are. Nodded. Thank you for your candor. 3 days later, James stood guard at a palace garden party. Camilla and Catherine appeared together, smiling for the cameras. They stood side by side, showing a united front. The press coverage was positive. Royal family unity, the headlines proclaimed. But James had been close enough to see. Camilla's hand trembling as she held her teacup, had seen the careful distance Catherine maintained between them, had seen William watching his stepmother with wary eyes. The cracks had been papered over. But they hadn't healed. Lieutenant Morris transferred to a different detail a week later. Not as punishment, but as a quiet acknowledgement that some positions were no longer tenable. She sent James a final message. No regrets. Some moments demand we choose who we are over what's convenient. James kept that message. Read it sometimes when he questioned his own choices, because in the end, that cold January morning had taught him something important. The crown could command obedience. It could demand respect, but loyalty, true loyalty, had to be earned. Day by day, action by action, choice by choice, and sometimes, the most powerful thing a guard could do was refuse to bow, not out of disrespect, but out of a deeper respect for what the crown was supposed to represent. James never forgot the sight of Camilla's tears, never forgot the weight of her pain. But he also never forgot the strength it took for Lieutenant Morris to stand firm, to choose principle over protocol. Both women, in their own ways, had been incredibly brave that day, and both had paid the price that bravery demands. Years from now, when the history of this reign was written, January 17th would be just another day. The public would never know what happened behind closed doors, would never understand the human cost of the headlines they consumed so casually. But James would remember. Morris would remember. And somewhere in Clarence's house, he suspected, Camilla would remember too. The day the mask slipped. The day the perfect royal facade cracked. The day everyone was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth, that crowns and titles don't protect anyone from being human, from hurting, from breaking under pressure that never, ever stops. The Queen Kate headlines continued. The public adoration of Catherine grew, and Camilla learned to smile through it all, the way she had learned to smile through everything else, but on quiet mornings. When James stood guard at Clarence's house, he sometimes saw her pause by a window, saw her hand touch the glass, saw the weight of invisible burdens press down on shoulders that carried a crown that had never truly fit, and he understood, perhaps better than most, that history's judgment rarely considers the cost of survival, only the final score.